Welcome back to another episode of the Vocal Action Podcast, where community and culture collide. We have a special guest today, Amity Paye of Color of Change. And I'm going to read you all her bio because it's like pretty dope. Okay. So, Amity is the Deputy Chief Marketing and Storytelling Officer at Color of Change. She oversees the organization's media strategy, social media, design, production, and partnerships to make Color of Change a household name. Her team uses media coverage, social media design, and video production to add pressure during campaigns and publicize some of the organization's most important victories on tech, accountability, transforming entertainment industries, and criminal justice reform. On this recent Oscars, right? You might have seen the Color for Change text code going across the screen. I think I also saw it and during the breaks when, sometimes when they pan away to commercial, they'll show you like what's happening in the room. So for those of y'all that watched the Oscars this year and you saw that, that was Amity and her team behind the scenes doing those things. And I did not know until I saw it on Instagram. I was like, oh, wow, that's her. Cool. And before Amity joined Color of Change in 2020, she led strategic communications at the labor union. Yes, yeah, I forgot about that. I remember that. 32BJ SEIU. She supported media relations for Black Youth Project 100. I did remember that, BYP. And she spent a decade as a journalist reporting on Black youth and social justice for The Nation, NBC, The Root, Jet Magazine, and Amsterdam News. Basically, Amity is up here just being the shiz naive, okay? All of Black girl magic and pouring all of that and her education experience into the work that is needed most. Amity is also a friend from high school, Boston Latin School. And no, there's no bias that's happening that most of my first interviews are with BLS students, but this is actually our 15th year. We just celebrated that in June, 15 years of graduating from high school. So maybe I'm a little nostalgic and wanting to catch up with some of my classmates. But yeah, she at least in high school, she was a amazing designer. She led our fashion talent design club. And actually before high school, Amity and I both attended a Stepping Stone, which helped us both to attend Boston Latin. And so there I remember like you were did you do a talent show? Were you in
Yeah, but I was probably pretty bad.
Yeah, but you were a part of the talent shows. And Amity also used to draw. Yeah, I remember we had a Spanish
Way
class
back.
and I used to like sneak and like look at her drawings because I don't know if you sat next to me or behind me or something like that. But yeah, she's also an amazing, amazing artist. So welcome Amity to the Vocal Action Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be able to catch up and talk through things. It's great.
Yes. Yes, yes. So let's start with I don't even know where to start. I like to start with you're from Boston, same as me. Were you born in Boston?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, okay. So you were born in Boston and you lived in, is that JP or Eggleston?
Yep, I
What
was in
that
JP. I
area?
moved around in JP a little bit during like middle and high school, but Boston
Okay.
girl through and through.
Right. Right, right. Cool, cool, cool. So let's talk about like your life growing up. What types of things were you into? What were some of your hobbies? Dislikes?
Yeah. I mean, I think you were along for a lot of the ride. I mean, honestly, I took school, I was like a nerd, right? Like took school really seriously, was like, I'm gonna get into Latin, top exam school in Boston. And then like I was pretty serious once we got into high school. And so I would say that was number one. Like, when I was at home, I was like reading books. I really like fiction. I'm still, totally any new fiction that comes out, I'm gonna read it. And so I was a nerd. I like science and math
Yeah.
and all the good school stuff. And like you said, I did a lot of art stuff, right? It's like I was drawing and I was designing clothes and like sort of like seeing how it was to actually like express some of my creativity as well.
Yeah. Are you still in art, like drawing?
Not in the same way, no.
Okay.
I went to school for I started school for fashion design, and I think
Okay.
I like grew out of it. I wasn't into like making art for other people. Like I didn't want to
Mhm.
sell my stuff. I was like, I don't want to make money off of this. I just want to like have fun and make clothes. And so sometimes I still make my own clothes, but I don't do it as like, a real hobby anymore.
Business, yeah. Yeah, I remember like even your sketchbook, you used to like couple your art with like words, like things you were feeling and stuff like that. So it was like still even then, like it was something that was representing a moment in time or an experience that you were having
Yeah.
for
That's right.
you.
And I always was like a writer. I think
Right.
like the same way I think any kid that reads a lot ends up writing a lot.
Yeah.
And so, I sort of use that to get into journalism and do that type of writing for many years. But yeah, I used to write all over my artwork.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like it was very few times it was just a single piece. It was always telling some sort of story.
Yes.
Yeah, so what's the last thing you designed for yourself for clothes, fashion
What
wise?
was it? Well, my team at Color of Change, we did this whole big event at Fashion Week last February. And when I was a kid, I had promised myself, I was like, if you're going to Fashion Week, like you're gonna make your own clothes, like you're gonna do it. So I made myself like a pants and like a top for Fashion Week. That was the last thing I think I made. And I don't,
That's so cool.
yeah, it was like a promise I made to myself. I was like, okay, I'm going to Fashion Week, having my fashion show. We did a fashion show where we use something called an inclusion rider, which is like
Okay.
illegal. It's like a legal document that you use in order to like ensure that hiring is diverse. And so we
Mm.
use that with IMG models to all throughout Fashion Week. Had this big show, and so I made my little outfit for that show.
Wow. That is really cool. You also made your senior prom outfit, right? If I
I
remember
did. I
correctly.
did make my prom outfit.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and, like, 1 or 2 friends. Never again. Like, the prom was so
Yes.
much work, like, my gosh, I can't, like, imagine doing that ever again.
It's funny you describe yourself as a nerd because that is not how I would have described you. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's the word I would have used. I would have said like she's very artistic. I always felt like you were pretty cool. Like you always had great style.
I mean,
Like
I was
that.
out, partying and stuff too, but,
Yeah.
you could be like a fun nerd, I guess.
Yeah. The first thing I would have probably said was I would have probably said artistic or fashion. Yeah. Those are the things that I most remember, because I
Yeah.
I was just telling somebody recently about our fashion talent club. I remember senior year, and I think you,
I
like,
did the weirdest
produced it,
fashion
right?
show. What is it?
Did you produce it our senior year or a couple scenes?
Yeah, I produced the show, a part of the I think I produced part of the show, but I did, like, this whole I was like, "Imma be a fashion designer," and I put out, like, 20 outfits or something
You
ridiculous.
did, and we wore them, and you had us, dance to Beyonce, "Red light, green light," like
Yes. Oh my goodness, I
and we had
forgot
a
that.
whole routine. Yeah, I was the MC that year. So it's it's just
That's so
really interesting
funny.
how things come full circle, right?
Well, I hope
15
those
years.
photos
You
never
do?
surface.
You have those photos?
I don't know, I was saying I hope they never surface. I don't know how
Oh, I was
crazy
gonna
it'll
say I
look.
want to see them. I want to see those photos. Yeah, okay. So then you graduated a lot and you started school for fashion
Yeah.
and then you transferred into journalism. And as we talked, like writing has always been a part of your artistic style. What was the like change for you that lets you know, yeah, I want to explore writing as like a career?
Yeah, like I think art and fashion design was always fun for me, but once it got to the point where like I was learning the skill in order to make money, I was like, "Oh, you know what? Like
Mhm.
this is different. Like I don't want to have to follow other people's trends." And so I was taking some journalism classes and I just loved it. I'm like, "Oh, I get to like chase after the interesting news and like ask people questions and like, take pictures." Like that just really appealed to me. And when I was in college, there were a lot of protests around like gay rights and like gay marriage. Students on campus were protesting. And so like when I was just starting to take journalism classes, it was like that was what there was to see and cover.
Mm, mhm.
Um, and I got really drawn to it. Like I like I like protests.
Right.
I was like, oh, let me just sit and like be in this space and feel the energy of like people trying to make change. And so my first stories were about that, was about the protests on
Yeah.
campus. And then I just sort of kept going from there.
Yeah. And you went to Syracuse for undergrad?
Yeah, I went to Syracuse. They have a Newhouse School of Communication. So it was like, I had chosen my school so that I could do a couple different things there if I
Right.
changed my mind.
Yeah. I went into school undecided
Yeah.
because
To Spelman,
it,
right?
no, I actually went to Tuskegee.
Oh, Tuskegee. Okay.
And
I knew it was a HBCU.
yes, I went to HBC. I think I was the only person in our class actually that went to an HBCU.
That tracks from our school, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, you know.
mm,
Um, and I thought I was gonna do like pre-law and drama. I got to Tuskegee and found out they did not have a pre-law program nor the drama minor that was advertised.
oh no.
But I went in undecided. I was going undecided anyway
Mm,
because I didn't really know where I fit, you know, like I knew I had this, I always have had this passion for speaking up, for advocating for racial justice. Um, but I didn't know how I wanted to do that. I knew I could kind of be successful in multiple different places. So I just took a bunch of different classes and then decided. But even now, that's a part of my journey in terms of finding my voice too. Like, um, this every space needs that voice, if we're being honest, you know?
yeah.
So, um,
I think so many times people think that like you're going to be on a specific path, or that you can plot out
mhm,
your path and you're going to stay on it forever. And I honestly, I just don't think that's how most people's lives pan out. It's like,
yeah.
you make plans and then God laughs. It's like
Right,
that's just how it
exactly.
works.
Exactly, especially in college. I remember people like, "Oh, you should be a marketing major." And I was like, all I thought marketing was, working at some big corporate company, wearing a suit and a
Mm,
briefcase every day,
trying to sell
pointing
like
pointing
Sprite
at
or
the
something.
screen with the pointer,
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I have like
backwards,
that vision in my head. It's from
right?
Blackish.
You know what I
I
mean?
would
And I was
imagine like
like,
from Blackish, like his job.
right, exactly. And I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. But I never knew that like I could do marketing for like a company
Mm,
like Color of Change, or start my own company to do those types of marketing ads, or work in whatever,
yeah,
at a marketing company. So that was something that I didn't know. Now that I know it, it's like, oh yeah, that could be something that I'm interested in.
yeah.
Thinking about that, do you feel like, thinking about your journey, that you can see some of that growing up? Like, are there certain things that now you think back on where you're like, yeah, this was preparing me or paving the way, this is when I first had that interest?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, all hail my parents. I think like there's
Mhm.
a piece where growing up, the I would roll my eyes and like complain about going to things with my parents, but they were preparing me for like who I am now, I think. So
Yeah.
both my parents were they were union members.
Oh,
So,
wow, okay. I
good
remember your
for
mom.
yeah, my mom was a teacher, so
Yep.
Boston Teachers Union, is like it's one of the biggest, strongest unions in the country, and so, um, there was a piece where like, we didn't go to protest necessarily, but like advocating for yourself and standing together with
Mhm.
like coworkers was something that like was talked about in my house.
Mhm.
And I think it was like a belief system of like you come together with people in your community to get what you want, like that. My stepfather did a bunch of sort of like housing justice work in our
Oh,
neighborhood, and
cool.
so I was like I had that stuff around me. And when you're a kid you think your parents are lame, but like that type of thing sort of sticks with you, and I
Mhm.
think like shaped a lot of how I see the world.
Yeah, yeah, that is really cool. That is really cool. I'm thinking about all the different things, and now as you grow up, you're right. Like, there are things that your parents put you in, or that you're just exposed to by the nature of maybe some of their interests,
Yep.
and it does trickle down in some way or another. Even this podcast, Vocal Action Podcast, which is a part of my business, Vocal Action. I think it's definitely from my dad and my mom. My dad,
Mhm.
being an immigrant, taught me
Mhm.
about like what it means to be Black, not just like African American, but like Black globally. And that just like connection for all of us, you know, and my
Mm.
mom's the one who put me in all of these like Black affirming programs as a kid that were all like, we're young Black queens and, you know, like
I love it. In the 80s and 90s
talented
was a
and
big deal.
gifted, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I had a lot of affirmation, and so
Mm.
definitely makes sense. Um, and so, speaking of parents, we talked a little bit earlier. I saw recently on social media, or I noticed recently, because I don't know how long you've had it, but you have like a very cool name that don't even ask me why I remember it to this day. But your full, are you okay with me putting your full government out there?
Yeah, you can
Like,
put
okay,
it out there.
like,
It's out
I have to beep it out or something.
there. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yes, but for some reason, I always remember your name was Amity Slung Bate Magic Paye,
Well,
right?
you know why? You remember it. I went through a phase. I went through a phase
Okay.
and there was like 1 year I decided that all my teachers were gonna call me Zlungbate, which is my legally
Oh,
my middle name, but it's like a country name in Liberia, West Africa, where my father is from. And so I was like, people can call me by this name. And I forced like a
okay.
couple of our teachers. And I think you were in my Latin class where I forced our teacher.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because yes, I remember that. I don't remember them calling you that, but I remember that full name. And I remember it being a conversation with like Amity Slung Bate Magic Paye. And I was like, okay. Okay, okay. And you had like cool meanings because amity is like friendship, right? Between two races. Look, see this
You remember all of this. I can't
people,
believe it. My God.
my friends tell me, my family and friends tell me all the time, like my memory is like an elephant, I guess.
Yeah, this is
Because
crazy.
yes, because amity is biracial. And I
Yeah,
remember you being like, yep, my name is, you know, amity, which is like friendship and unity between two races. Sung Bate is like, you know, from my dad, and it's African Magic is like your
this is
grandmother's
crazy.
name or something like that,
Yes,
right? Like,
exactly. It is my grandmother's name. I mean, props to you. I don't know. I have this kind of memory. I wish I did.
yeah. And it was like an all together, it's all me. Like you were just like very on it. Which
It's
is
so funny.
probably how I remember.
So ridiculous. I probably like force people. I was probably like, y'all gonna remember me.
I mean, and I also think you started like writing it out maybe on documents. Maybe that's how I first learned it, right? Like you were
It's
writing
only a
your
little embarrassing. No, you know what? So I'm mixed race. My mom is white. My father is African from Liberia and an immigrant to the United States. And there's a piece where like they were really intentional about naming me and wanted me to understand like that my name represented who I was, right? And
right.
part of it was important. And I guess apparently I really took that to heart.
You
um,
did. You did. It's
but
funny to think about now that you were probably like in high school, and like advocating for yourself, just like you were just talking about that you learned, you know, like, no, this is my name and
yeah.
it's important and it means that. And I want you to know like all of me.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's right. And you know, I brought that through. Like I really do think my name like represents who I am, right? Is like I'm Amity. I have like a lot of different types of people in my life. And like I like sort of force my friends together and even though they're from different walks of life and like yeah, like you know, I like understanding different cultures, but I also really know I've worked really hard as an
Hmm.
adult to really know each of the cultures that I'm blessed to like
Yeah.
have as part of me.
Yeah. Yeah. This is also a side note that you just reminded me of when you talked about cultures. Weren't you a part of like a dance group or something? It was like you, Bree, Monique, and Kayla
Oh,
Cuddy.
that wasn't a real dance group.
And
That was like
y'all used to go to like all the Caribbean bashments, and y'all
don't say the
really
name of
learned
this dance group.
something.
It's so embarrassing. Yes. I mean, yeah, like unofficially. I mean, essentially, I was not that good a dancer either, but like I was not good really at all. But like we would go
Really?
out. Not at all, Rashada. Not at all. Not at
I
all.
don't. Now that I'm
But I
thinking,
like
I'm like,
to
I
have
actually
fun
don't
and
know
like
if I
go
ever
out and
saw
just
Amity
like
dance. You were there, but I'm like, I actually don't know if I really saw her dance.
I mean, I hope you don't remember me dancing. It would have been bad. Like I was not good at this, but No, like we went out on the weekend,
Yes,
and
yes.
like enjoyed ourselves. Like I've always been the kind of person where like on the weeknights I'm like home reading, and then like
Mhm.
on Saturday and Sunday, like or well, Friday and Saturday I'm out, like
Yeah, you
wanting to
have to
enjoy
find balance.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanna ask you about that. Recently, I watched the interview with Angie Martinez and Tamika Mallory. Don't ask me why my hands just did this because it's, like, such a serious move, but it was such a great interview. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but,
Mhm.
she interviewed Tamika Mallory on her podcast, In Real Life, and Tamika was really just talking about how the pressure of being on the front line and constantly being engulfed in social justice, racial justice, criminal justice, like just this work,
Yeah.
um, really took her to a dark place, and and how it was really hitting rock bottom for her, which was ending up in recovery, in a recovery facility or program
Mm.
that helped her learn, or helped her begin to learn, because she said that, she's still trying to find that balance, helped her find the balance, and so you, now being, the deputy chief marketing and social and storytelling officer, how do you strategize the balance in telling those stories? And I'm just going to go into this anecdote briefly, but this morning, literally on the NAACP website, or the social media page, they posted a video of like a man being like punched in the head by one officer and held down by like two others.
I think I saw.
And that was like the first thing I saw on my timeline this morning. And I have literally, like, on my personal page, I do not follow any of these pages.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to be knowledgeable, but because, I work in government. I work with people who are impacted by this every day. I'm a Black woman. I'm impacted every day.
Yeah.
And it's like I have to find peace and joy at some point, right? And so I try to do that specifically through my social media. And so as a story, it's like, how do you how do you balance it out? Are there things you're just like, we're not going to show? Like, how do you do
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah. The at Color of Change, and like really with most of the work that I've done, been really intentional about actually not showing pictures of like
Mhm.
Black folks being abused in
Right.
various ways, whether that's in policing or it's in like through poverty, right? It's like
Yeah.
so often people want to like so often the ways that we get to change is by telling stories of pain.
Mhm.
And like people like exposing all the worst things in their lives. And I just think that that's not
Right.
actually the way to build power for Black people. I don't think it's the
Mhm.
way for anyone to build power is by like just
Right.
looking vulnerable. Like there's this
Right.
piece where um yeah, like Black folks aren't actually vulnerable, right? Like there's a piece where like we're under attack, right? And
Mhm.
so if we're under attack, then partying on the weekend is actually part of creating a change in our culture and our society.
It is. I always say, like,
Mhm.
rest is rebellion,
Yeah,
unfortunately, like, for
exactly.
Black people, but it's a form of rebellion. And Tamika
Yeah.
actually talked about that in her interview, how she posted, I guess, a picture of her enjoying herself, and I guess in like a swimsuit or whatever, and someone commented like, "Was Harriet Tubman in a bikini?" And it's
I hope so.
like,
I
probably.
hope so,
I mean,
right? Like,
we would wish that was for her, but like, did she even have that grace to be able to do that then? Like, I'm sure she took her moments of fun, I hope that she did, but was she on a bikini in the Chesapeake? I don't know. Like,
well, there's a piece where like even the way that stories are told like historically. So we think about history books or like the way we're taught in school is like Harriet Tubman only did this one thing. Like she was
Right.
only this one kind of she was just Moses and that's it. Right? Or we think of like a really great example of this is like the bus boycotts, right? In
Yeah.
Selma, it was like, oh, someone, you sit on a bus and like, oh, the whole movement kicks off. Is like that's not how change works, actually.
Yeah.
And so like really every single person in who has created change has had real life also, right?
Hmm.
Like maybe they're known, maybe MLK is known for giving his speech, but this man had a life. And
Yeah.
there's a really there's is I think especially when we're talking about black folks is really important to show that like we're human.
Yeah.
Like there's this piece of like, oh, even if we're fighting, like I don't want to be more than human, right?
Yes.
Like I don't want
Hmm.
to be treated less than human, but I don't want to be considered more than human. I'm not like some superwoman, super strong black woman. Like
Yeah.
no, like I need to rest in
Yeah.
order if I'm going to do any work at all,
Yes.
and like deserve that and like that should be celebrated as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's funny, or interesting that you mentioned about the images that you show, because today when I was just like going through the website, familiarizing myself, you all have different spaces where you're advocating most, which intersects with everywhere. It intersects everywhere, like tech and environment and so economics and things like that. But something that I specifically noticed was like the pictures that you have in the drop downs are like people like looking powerful, and you mentioned that, but it's something that I noticed like, oh, on the economic side, I didn't see like someone with their sign, like give me $1 or whatever, help
No.
please or whatever. I saw action and I saw movement. And yeah, it was something that resonated. And now when you're talking about why, like that works, because I went back and looked at it again, like, oh, are all of them like this?
Yeah,
That
this is a
makes
rule. My staff, I think I drive them crazy sometimes because they're like, oh, here's the picture of like the person like on the street begging. And it's like, no, no. Like that is real. Like those
Mhm.
are real, but also those depictions are overplayed, right? It's like we've seen that before. Let's show black people actually standing up for themselves, right?
Yeah,
Actually advocating for themselves in positions of power.
yeah,
Or building power together is so much more powerful. And also it actually changes the way people think and behave.
it does. It does. It does. When I worked at, or in several places that I worked, I try to move young people away from like being pimped for stories,
Yeah.
because that's very real. Like foundations and agencies, whatever, they reach out to you and they want the young people. And I specifically have worked with young people and their families over a number of years, and they want the stories. The Washington Post wants the story of like the drug addict mom and all that other type of stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, but what picture are you going to show? Number one. And like, what are you going to focus on? Because we're not just going to focus on the fact that, she used substances, like
Yep.
this mom has moved way past that. And we're going to focus on like what she's doing to move past that. So that can actually be helpful to someone else and what she sees for her future, because that is what's most important right now.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that in a space of what you're doing. And just to back up really quick, I just want to read Color of Change's bio on their social media, because I thought this was pretty dope. It says, we design campaigns powerful enough to end practices that unfairly hold Black people back and champion solutions that move us all forward. Like, that was a snap moment. It
I
was.
didn't write that one. That one preceded me, but it's pretty powerful. We kept it because it's
It
really
was like, come on now, like we're trying, like stuff holds us back, and we're trying to move those barriers out the way. Like
yeah.
that was really, really, really powerful. So prior to coming to Color of Change, were you at the union then, or?
Yeah, I worked at a labor union before moving into color change and direct racial justice work. And honestly, it was really good training. Like the
Mhm,
unions know how to organize. And a lot of what we're taught about how organizing functions is just wrong. Like
mhm,
movements don't pop up out of nowhere. They take decades of work. And at the union, I was at a SEIU local in New York, and we were organizing airport workers.
mhm.
And so it was
Yeah,
like, okay, we started off with like I mean, oh my God, like I can't even tell you, like the first, like in the first years of the campaign that we ran, like we were meeting people who were being paid below minimum wage. They didn't have
Wow.
any days off, like literally 7 days a week job. They didn't have sick days or paid vacation days or health insurance or anything. And they're working in like environments were just ridiculous. Like they weren't being treated
Mhm.
like humans. And yeah, and I spent 5 years organizing with these people, and I was doing the communications work, so I was helping them
Mhm.
tell their stories to the public and trying to be intentional about like not positioning them as these like people to feel sorry about, right? I
Yeah.
wanted them to look powerful, like they were doing, like to me I was like, oh, these people are superheroes, like they're working these terrible jobs and they have this vision of creating a life for themselves that is actually good, right? And then
Yeah.
like actually creating that vision was just incredible. And um so yeah, like they went on strike, which was crazy. Like you have to be so brave to go on strike. And I was just I got to be there and learn from them and help them tell their stories in ways that were like honest and powerful. And now
Yeah.
they have, you know, in New York and New Jersey, they have the highest minimum wage in the country. They have health insurance, they have paid days off, all the things that you like expect from a job where you're,
Yeah.
you know, being treated like a human, and where you're being treated like your work is important. And so yeah, that was like, you know, 5 years of my life like fully invested in airports and airport workers and just making sure they were, you know, had good jobs.
Yeah, especially airport workers, because right now a lot of us, our flights are being changed and canceled because
Well,
they can't
exactly.
find the pilot and the crew, and everybody's protesting.
But
So
if you listen to the news about it, right, we organized in like the Northeast, so like
mhm.
New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Philadelphia. But if you listen to the news, a lot of the reason that the flight our flights are getting canceled is because like one, people are getting sick from COVID, which is a whole nother problem. But two, like people don't want to work at the airports if it's not a good job.
Right.
And so there's a piece where like there's a supply and demand for jobs right now, and people don't want those jobs because they're terrible jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So then you transition that work, which all makes sense. I'm so happy we're covering all this because I can see it. But I think it's important for people to be able to follow the journey and to be able to connect the dots. So like you're working on storytelling for airport workers in the union, and now you get this opportunity for Color of Change. Did you know about Color of Change, or like how did you find out? How did you know about this organization? And how this opportunity lands in the perfect lap.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I think I was really lucky. I my trajectory actually follows more the social movements in the country. So
Mhm.
I got out of college in 2011, and Occupy Wall Street started the like the
Oh,
month after I arrived in New York City. You know, I was
yeah.
just lucky, and I was reporting at the time, so I was like, oh, let me go and chase these like young people who are on the streets.
Yeah, and Occupy Wall Street was like, we are the 1% or the
Yeah, it was
99,
like
something like
yeah,
that.
like
Yeah,
well, it was like
okay.
eat the 1% and we're the 99%.
Yeah, wow, that's a throwback. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so, you know, I was reporting on that, and like doing that organizing got me into the labor movement where I
Mhm.
could like, you know, make a living wage and like pay my own bills.
Right.
And then in 2014, um BLM started. And actually, well, so I was reporting until 2014, and I was just so lucky. Like I quit my reporting job, and a week later, I got a call from a friend that I had known from Occupy who said, like, Amity, we're going down to North Carolina. Like, do you want to come? And I was like, well, I don't have anything better to do. Like, sure, yes. I just quit my job.
Right.
And that was one of the meetings where, well, one of the first meetings where BLM was discussed. It was like being formed, the people who
Yes.
created it were there.
Yes.
And so I got myself into movement spaces because of that. And I was reporting at the time, and then my friends there, you know, I'm the only reporter in the room because I'm like young and black and they let me there. And like, you know, I made friends. And they're like, Amity, you're not allowed to just sit on the sidelines anymore. Like, what do you think? What do you have to say? Like, you
Mm.
can't just sit here in the room. And I'm like, oh, I'm a journalist. Like, I don't have opinions. And they're like, no, no, like if you're going to be here, you're going to do work with us. And I just really got like pulled into community, uh and like sort of challenged to be part of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so, BLM started 2014, and I was covering that, and it just was like they were like, no, you're not gonna be a journalist anymore. You're gonna be doing PR for the movement work. You know all the journalists. Go tell them to write our stories. And so I sort of I transitioned
Yeah.
into doing PR for like Movement for Black Lives and the Black Youth Project, and
Yeah.
like the organizations that were really thinking through like how do we create a movement,
Mm-hmm.
how do we teach each other. Like the Black Youth Project was all about like a Black feminist lens, and it was like totally changed the way I see the world, learning from my peers. And so part of this was I was just lucky. Like I met the right people, I was around in the right moments, I had freedom to do what I wanted to do at the moments that mattered. And so that got me into sort of racial justice work. And then, coming out of my work in a union, this great racial justice job opened up, and like I knew the right people to like recommend me and tell me about the position. And so, my friends always joke, they're like, Amity follows the wind. Like, something happens and like she might say yes. Is like
Yeah.
that's really how my career has evolved.
Yeah, I was actually about to say that because that's vocal action. Action is an acronym in itself, but vocal action, the idea of the name that I came up with is partly just because I've always been a voice, as you know, like in high school, my campaign was a choice with the voice.
Yes.
Um, but there were a lot of people talking, and I felt like we need to translate those conversations into action. And
Yeah.
so, like, that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, some people may call it following the wind, but it's like you're listening to that voice, you're listening to your voice, your
Yeah.
gut, whatever you want to call it, and things that feel right, you are engaging in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's
You're
right.
acting, and you're becoming a contributor and a part of, as they challenge you to do, those movements. And so what are some of the things that you're working on at Color of Change?
Well, now I get to work on anything that impacts Black people. So
Yeah.
it's, like you said, it's really broad. I think some of the like most exciting stuff that we're doing is really trying to change the way that people think about Black people in
Mhm.
our country. And so, I talked a little bit about that, of like shifting the images that people see and the way that we tell stories.
Mhm.
Um, but we're actually, bringing our expertise around policing, for example, into Hollywood and training writers in Hollywood how
Oh.
to, tell more honest stories about Black people. A really good
Oh.
example of this is like if you watch any of the like crime TV shows where they're like, or like sometimes they're
I know
reality,
what
but
you mean.
sometimes they're
Mhm.
like, it's like
And
a cop
everybody has
show.
to be extra like yo yo, and you're
Yes.
like,
It's not realistic. Like that happens, and then also like they have all these Black cops like on the shows,
yeah,
and it's
uh-huh.
like there are not that many Black cops in this country, for one, and two, when racist things happen on these shows, these Black cops are like shocked, as if like this 40-year-old Black man never experienced racism. And so what we've been doing,
Old Black police officer.
right. And he's like, racism, oh my gosh. And it's like, this is unrealistic. And so what we've been doing is actually going into the writers' rooms, like when they're actually writing these stories,
Oh.
and saying like, here's all the data that we have, because we run campaigns, so we have lots of data and information. We're like, here's all the information. Like, here are the ways you're doing this wrong. Here are ways you can actually tell more honest stories. If you are writing a police show, like you can be more honest, you can show Black people in like their full humanity and in better
Yeah,
ways. And so we're doing a lot of that work that's been really fun.
that is really dope. I never even thought about that. Like, I never even thought about having the consultant right there in the writer's room telling stories in that way. I've always thought, I guess I've always thought Hollywood is going to tell the stories that they want to tell. And that's why it's so important for Black people to just like have their own, and be
Yeah.
directors and producers. And that is still very important. So we could tell our most authentic stories. But there's also space for someone who is like a researcher or is in social justice that may have never saw them working in Hollywood, Like there's a space for you to be able to do that. That is really dope. Like,
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, the police do this. Like the biggest consultants in Hollywood are police. And so like our opposition is doing this. They're putting in their own stories. And so it's like like at this point we're catching up, but we're trying to get into that work, right? It's like if they're going to be teaching people about what policing looks like we have to balance that and teach those same people what it should look like or what it could look like in the future if we actually reach the change that we want, and that people are calling for. And so we've been doing a lot of that work, not only in policing, but like reality TV. We've been doing kids programming, like really just making
wow.
sure that there's like a balance in the stories that are being told.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm saying yeah, because like I'm just taking all of this in and just how cool that is, but then also taking it in for myself, because there's it's just resonating in so many different ways and a lot of full circle moments. If you ever visited my website prior to this year, I had a lot of like Ava DuVernay quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And because she had this quote that was like, Black people need to save ourselves. We don't need the night coming in to save us. And that's not the stories that I'm trying to tell.
Yeah.
And I clung to that quote because I'm like, yes, this is exactly why I started this consulting company, because
Right.
I'm in spaces all the time and there are very little Black people in the space that are creating the actual project plans and creating the agendas, and doing the data, creating research projects that are rooted in our community, not ones that we're like adapting from somewhere who into in Ville, but like we're just not in that room. So all of this is just like resonating.
Yeah. I
And
mean, I think there's a piece where, especially when I was a journalist, like what we would say is like the best person to tell a story is the person who's experienced it,
right.
right? And I think that goes for all types of storytelling. And
Does.
so I like that's why I love your podcast so much, right? It's like you're claiming your story and saying like I'm going to have
Mhm,
these conversations because like you're worthy and your story and your
mhm,
experiences are worthy of being discussed. And I think like people just like we need to see more diversity, but
mhm.
also like we can take over some of the existing like structures,
Yeah,
and hold them accountable to being better for us while we also diversify and create our own content is like I think both is really important.
yeah, yeah. Really dope, really dope. So yeah, I'm like mind blown right now. Yeah, definitely. So speaking of diversity, and we're talking about racial and cultural and experience diversity, but your like titles and the things that you do has also diversified itself, right? Over the last couple years or few years. You are now a wife as well. And I saw recently, are you like a farmer? Are you
Well,
like
so yes, I mean I'm a cat mom also.
is it a botanist or something? Like, are you
Well, yeah.
what are
So
you growing out there in your backyard?
well, so I when I was a teenager, I decided that I was gonna buy what I was calling an epic country house. I was like,
Oh
I'm gonna get out of the
wow.
city. I'm gonna have an epic country house. And 5 years ago, I bought land. And then the pandemic started, and we were like, whoa, like I guess we're gonna live in this, like I guess we're gonna live in this land full time and like be out in the country. And so I've turned into
Right.
like this country person. But what I found, like going back to like our conversation about parents, is like my father was an immigrant from West Africa and Liberia. And when he first came to my property, he's like, "Oh my gosh, Amity, you did it! Like you did the thing I came to the United States to do." Which he was an agriculture student when he came, and so his dream was to like have a farm. And have you? I didn't grow up with my father, but we have a close relationship now, and so there's a piece where like, yeah, I'm sort of turning into a farmer, and like for
Yeah. Did you
some
know that
people
was
that
his dream though?
no, I did not know this when I bought my land. And I
Wow.
think like some things like live in your body from your parents.
Yeah.
And so,
So
like for some people in my world, it's like, oh, this is so random. Amity's got this big farm and she's growing all her food. But like actually, like this was like my father's dream, is like, and there's a way that like I think I was meant to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you like a vegetarian or vegan?
No, girl, I need meat. But
Okay. Are you
but we don't.
raising chickens and stuff?
No,
Like, how
no,
far are you
no.
going? Okay.
My husband would love to, but I have vetoed that for now.
Okay.
Like I can't have too many animals. Like I just plants are okay with me. But no, we have like a very big garden and we're growing like all the things, squash and tomatoes and zucchinis and all the
Okay. Okay.
and so we eat a lot, in the spring, summer, fall, we like eat a lot from the garden. Then we go shopping for for chicken and beef and all the
Right.
meats and like mix that in. But most of our veggies come from the garden for like most of the 3 seasons.
That is dope. That is dope. Do you sell them? Like, can someone come and buy some?
No, we don't sell anything, but I mean, anytime anyone comes here, they leave with like a grocery bag or like, when I go into the city, I bring my friends groceries. So it's not,
Okay.
I'm not selling stuff, but I give stuff to like the people in my life.
Yeah. 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 Well, I'm gonna invite myself because
Yeah, next
I
time you're
just
in New York, come
I
on
just
up.
started visiting a local farmers market, and they give out some things for free at community market, and I'm like, it lasts just so much longer than sometimes the stuff I buy in the store.
Yeah.
And I'm a fresh produce kind of person, not really like a canned and things like that. So yeah, I'm inviting
Yeah,
myself
next time you're in New York,
to
you got to
start
come
something
visit.
like
I mean, I go pick my lunch, most days.
that. So what is next for Amity, the marketing and storyteller slash farmer
Girl.
slash wife
I
slash
mean, I think what's next for me is like getting into fiction. There's a piece
Ooh,
there's a piece where like, I've always read all the fiction, like I love all the thing, all the sci-fi and dystopian futures, and I think there's a lot of power in them. Like especially doing activism work, like I actually think that most activism is like an act of fiction, right? Like you can't you can't be an activist without like envisioning a different future.
right. Yeah.
And so yeah, I want to get into that more of like maybe in my work of like let's actually like create the visions of worlds without police, for example. Like
Right.
we've been saying we want something different, like let's put on paper what that looks like, what it feels like,
Yeah.
how it functions. And so I want to do that in my work, but also like, in my personal life, if I can get myself to sit down and actually write something.
Yeah. That reminded me of Lovecraft Country. I don't know if you
Yeah.
watched that. Yeah, like there were, I mean, I know some of it is based off of a book, but there were pieces that I don't think were written in the book just about alternative universes and things. And that was really cool, even for me to sit down and watch and say, yeah, what if? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And
it's
they
just kind
write
of
their
cool.
own stories, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Well,
like there's a meme that's going around that's like, if you can't vision it, you can't be it, or like if you can't see it, you can't become it. And I think like we have a project to do of creating the vision of like what's next for Black people, what's next for our country, what's next for all of us in our individuality of like really being clear on that so that we can become that thing.
yeah, that's actually my homework right now in therapy. Um, it's actually to dream, um,
Yeah.
because and maybe other Black people feel like this as well, but at some point as individuals, as adults, we stop dreaming because you just can't like move past reality. Like things just seem like, okay, that's just too far, like, and so you stop dreaming. All you can do is focus on what's the next step or what are the things that you can see. And so it's so important to never lose that. And yeah, I definitely lost that. So I'm really thankful to have that project. And I'm grateful for the work that you're going to do in fiction, to help people imagine the worlds that we're trying and fighting so hard to create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important, I think. And then the nice thing is that we can all do it. Like so often pieces of activism or pieces of like future building are like exclusive. Like only certain people get to work in government and create the laws.
Mhm.
Only certain people get to be like out on the streets protesting, but visioning is something we can all do, and I think there's a
Mhm.
lot of power in that.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Amity, for this catch up and conversation today, just about all the work that you've done, the work that you're continuing to do, and how you're ever evolving and finding ways to reconnect or to connect, or to create a greater connection with all the parts of you, like that is pretty dope. I love that you are going with the wind. Um and it's inspiring to see that you've been able to create a career and one that is able to sustain you, because people say that you can't do that, but you've been able to do that successfully. And so people need to see more of that as well, just Black women thriving in all of their dimensions, and figuring out how to do that. So thank you so much. You all can follow all the great work and storytelling that Amity is doing at Color of Change. That is at COLOROFCHANGE for those of you all that are listening. And is there anything else that you want to say?
No, just thank you for having me on, and thank you for creating this space. I think, it's
Mm.
very you. I love getting to hear you advocate for, like change, but also like for yourself. I think it's really
Yeah.
important, and also like, it's like very very much who you are and who I've always known you to be. And so it's just beautiful
Yes.
to like get to watch and experience that.
Oh, great, 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 great. Well, thank you for that word. And just all the nuggets that you dropped that I will now have to think about as well. Just for my own life. This has been another episode of the Vocal Action Podcast with Amity Paye. And I'm your host, Rashana Roach, global strategy and social impact leader, and around the way girl going around the world. You can always follow me and my journeys at Vocal Action LLC on all social media platforms. Peace.